Hello and welcome to No Veto Video. I'm Katherine.
And I'm Carson.
This week we're here to review the movie Bad Medicine.
Bad Medicine is a comedy from 1985, written and directed by Harvey Miller, and starring Steve Guttenberg, Alan Arkin, Julie Haggerty, Curtis Armstrong, and Julie Kavner, who you may know from The Simpsons, among other things.
I guess the basic plot description of Bad Medicine is the feckless scion of a medical family who's been rejected by every medical school in America finds his way to medical school in an unnamed, mythic Central American country where he discovers comradeship and a general love of the practice, and things go from there.
The reason I picked this movie, I'd seen it around the time it came out on HBO or Cinemax or something when I was around 10, and remember really enjoying it. I also think that it kind of fits the current medical situation in that hospitals and doctors are understaffed, but are still expecting, or underfunded, understaffed, lack of resources in general, but still expected to give high amounts of care and spend a lot of time with their patients, and it just doesn't work out well. When I first saw the movie Patch Adams, it made me think of this a little bit, where Patch Adams was a much higher quality movie in many ways, but it still felt a lot like they had to scrape together to make their medical care work.
Yeah, I guess I can see that. For me, this is such an interesting movie because on some ways, it's made in 1985. In some ways, it's definitely showing its age. In other ways, it's really not. There were sort of unexpectedly high-quality storytelling choices being made that I was just enjoying it as sort of sort of classic 80s comedy with the witty repartee and the straight man and the fool and, the byplay back and forth of dialogue and, off-screen wisecracks, which, was done with ADR or something like that. And just really enjoying that, and then seeing this other sort of more heartfelt story being told on the edges of it, which is, the idea of really asking a pretty serious question about who deserves access to high-quality care, and deciding, rather determinedly that everyone has the right to access to high-quality care. And I think, so I can see your Patch Adams, allusion there. I definitely was thinking about that. There's just a lot to enjoy about this film. I mean, you come for the cast, maybe, if you have longings for the 1980s era Steve Guttenberg, or even Julie Haggerty from Airplane, who's doing kind of her same Elaine thing here, but with some real edge to it, a different kind of core to this character than the character that she played in Airplane. But really, and then you stay for the surprisingly prescient discussion about medical care and white privilege and other things like that. Yeah, it's amazing. Like, the more you know to look for it, the more you can see it at play everywhere.
Or if you like Curtis Armstrong from the Revenge of the Nerds series, or more recently Metatron from Supernatural, then he would be another actor if you were following his career. This would be a good movie to check out.
Yes, definitely. I think in many ways his performance was one of my favorites in the film.
He did really well.
Not for any of the serious discussions of medical care or anything like that, because he's just a pillhead.
But his delivery was right on time.
Exactly, right? He has a great way about him, and knows certainly how to deliver this kind of character. This definitely will feel a lot like, if you watch Supernatural, will feel like that character for me.
So the movie opens up with the main character, Jeff, played by Steve Guttenberg, sitting at a table with his mother, father, and sister, who are all doctors, and him being pressured into being a doctor even though he can't get accepted into medical school due to his grades, and just really doesn't want to be a doctor. His mom asks him if he wants to be a doctor, and it's okay to tell her, and he says no, and it looks like she is about to have a heart attack. So it clearly wasn't really okay to say no to this. In walks his dad, then saying he found a place south of Miami that will take him, which is the Central American country that's never named that Catherine mentioned earlier.
For what it's worth, this whole movie was filmed in Spain, but obviously they couldn't set it in Spain because Spain has a functional medical system, even in 1985. I think from the beginning there's this idea that the parents get called on their garbage of like expecting their son to turn out in exactly this way, and the movie says no, he's going to turn out in this other way, similar to what you maybe wanted, but with his own style about it. He gets called on his garbage of not caring enough and not, making it all about him and how terrible his life has been, that he's not, been able to be free to do what he wants. The movie calls the, founder of the medical institution, the medical university that he goes to, on his garbage for being, unreasonable and dictatorial. It doesn't really call him on being a little rapey. I mean, it does a little bit, but not to the degree that I was hoping it would. It kind of goes through all the way. It calls Western medicine out for being dismissive of indigenous cultures. On the other hand, it holds the indigenous cultures responsible for, taking the reins of their own health and being full players and full partners in their own well-being. This movie is very smart in that it doesn't let anybody get away with its crap, and I really very much appreciate that for a stupid 1985 comedy.
Oh, and you raise a good point. Many movies of its time period would use the indigenous people as the butt of many jokes, but they weren't really treated that way. They were treated respectfully for the most part, and as Catherine had mentioned, taking the reins for their own care. They would come in, say what was wrong with them. They would use, there was a communication barrier, but they would talk to the doctor as if they actually trusted the doctor, not, a comic relief of, oh, I'm scared of the doctors, and just shy away from them. Even the local medicine man, who was the only health care they had, works with the doctors.
At one point, early on in the film, right after he's arrived in this undisclosed Central American country, there's this part where he's going through what will be his dorm room, and it's just like, oh no, I can't live here, oh no, there's cockroaches, and oh no, the plumbing is substandard, and oh no, the bed looks not, comfortable to sleep on. I'm like, oh, and I was saying, oh no, are we going to be subjected to a movie that's all about sort of pulling this place up to, standards? And the answer to the question, joyfully, happily, was no, that there's accommodation that has to be made on both sides, and there's really something to be enjoyed about that. I think in a lot of ways, if you're a fan of 80s comedies, everything you want is right here. You got your Weekend at Bernie's, you got your Gross Anatomy, you have all these other, all of the other films of the 80s kind of gets rolled into one in this package. It's really very delightful.
So, keeping with something that you said earlier, and I don't feel bad about giving away a spoiler on a 32-year-old movie, but by the end of the movie, he does actually want to be a doctor. It turns out, though, that the money, the fame, the prestige wasn't a motivating factor for him, like it was for the rest of his family, or tradition. I guess that was another factor for the rest of the family. He just really genuinely enjoys helping people and making a difference in the world.
And that's actually a very uncynical look at the craft, which I appreciate.
So what was your takeaway from the experience with his family?
So his family is just this very mixed bag of people. You got a dutiful older sister, and I'm a person who, was also an older sister who, very much was compliant with parental guidance. So there's a part of me that was like, oh, it's a Katherine character, great. I don't usually enjoy seeing myself show up on film. And she's sort of it's entirely projection on my part. But the parents are very strange, because there comes to a certain time when, they're the American students at this university have funded an underground clinic, basically by stealing drugs from their university. And when all of that gets exposed and it looks like they're going to go to jail and everything's going to go terrible, even before the dad has really experienced his son as sort of competent, he's still there saying, we're going to make this right, we're going to do okay. Not because of any sort of care for him, but sort of, this idea of family honor to protect. I don't know, it's a weird set of portrayals. Of the most sort of stock 80s comedy characters, who have very little dimension and very little depth, I think his parents are sort of the prime examples of that. You don't get very much from them. You also don't get very much from the Gilbert Gottfried character, who's sort of this teacher's pet, school monitor, crossing guard kind of character. The only thing that I can appreciate from it is that he's not doing the Gilbert Gottfried voice that you're thinking of right now. So there's that.
Yeah, it's actually, unless you know it's Gilbert Gottfried, it's actually really easy to overlook that he's even in the film.
Yeah, it's a very understated Gilbert Gottfried performance, so, props to Mr. Gottfried.
And he's not the center of attention like he is in many of the movies he plays a part in.
Yeah, no, there's actually some really nice sharing of screen time, that all of the sort of cadre of 5 American students get a nice bit of time together, and the interplay between them is nice. They all have these different, dyads that they make at various points in the movie, and you can see how they relate differently to one another at all those different times.
And really, except for a few minor characters, none of them feel one-dimensional. They always feel like they are real humans. The writer developed them pretty well.
Yeah, and not in the ways that you would necessarily expect. Like, the good old boy is from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and, the wise, older student is also sort of, flaky. So you have sort of these interesting ways in which, there's unexpected juxtaposition.
Mm-hmm.
The Jeff Marks character, the character played by Steve Guttenberg, comes from the most LA-looking Boston I've ever seen in my life. So there's also that. That has more to do with filming than the storytelling itself.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any takeaways from this film for you?
I found the pacing to be really good. It didn't feel like anything was rushed. It didn't feel like anything was dragging on. They told a good story, and they actually told a story that kind of needed to be told. It's not just a frivolous movie like you think of 80s comedy. It does show a lot of development, family tension. As I saw it as a child, it didn't fit the same family dynamic I had, but I could see where a lot of pre-teens through mid to late teens might feel a bunch of pressure to go into a family business, or even just be pushed by their parents into a field that they may not want to go into, and this may have been very relatable for a lot of people.
I think for me, my only sort of last thought is just how very unfortunate the Alan Arkin character is.
Mm-hmm.
He plays the founder of this school. He's a doctor from UCLA who's experienced, some racism in America, but also had like a fruitless marriage and has sort of weird ideas about Catholicism and childbearing, and has sort of latched onto the character played by Julie Haggerty, and has just decided of his own accord that she will be his next wife, and that so therefore all of his overtures to her are okay. Just in the coming on the heels of the kind of month that our culture has had, the idea of like a guy who just decides that he owns a woman because he's decided to marry her. It is truly the most unfortunate part of the whole movie. And if it's something that will set your teeth on edge, then this might not be the movie for you. But for me, that part was cringeworthy and uncomfortable, and I still found that I was having a good time while I watched this film. So it's a good recommendation. And
he's not supposed to be a likable character.
Yeah, it's difficult to say. He's not supposed to be a likable character, and then there's still something off-putting about it.
Yeah.
So there's that.
So what would you recommend if people liked this movie?
Okay, so my override recommendation is actually, I'm going to stick with 1985 and another movie about somebody who could stand to take his chosen field a little more seriously. And I'm going to recommend the movie Real Genius, starring Val Kilmer. And it's just really very fun. It's a movie that Carson and I will quote at great length to one another. It has another one of those sort of just over-the-top 80s college kinds of scenes going on, and I think you guys would enjoy it very much. I don't know that it's available anywhere, but Real Genius.
I've already mentioned Patch Adams, but also if you enjoyed this, you'll probably like Spies Like Us. It's from around the same time period. It's also about, I don't want to say goof-offs, because in Bad Medicine they weren't all goof-offs, but it's definitely about people who weren't given the tools for their job, but tried nonetheless and ultimately succeeded, despite all expectations. It's, as I said, from around the same time period. It's also got a big name cast. It's extremely funny. So yeah, check that out if you are one of the few people who probably hasn't seen it yet.
So our override recommendations this week: Real Genius and Spies Like Us.
And Patch Adams.
And Patch Adams. Next time on No Veto Video, we'll be going to the cinema and then home again. And we'll be responding to the movie The Mountain Between Us, starring Kate Winslet and Idris Elba.
Until next time, goodbye.
Carson's ready to go, but we're not quite ready to go just yet. So thank you very much for joining us. We're happy that you guys were here. If you'd like to hit subscribe, we would enjoy that. Or leave us some comments down below, and we'll check those out as well. So now, say goodnight, Gracie.
Good night.
Good night.